The first time Clara realized that marriage was ending, it wasn't because she caught her husband cheating. It wasn't because she found secret messages or overheard whispered conversations. It was because of one sentence spoken in front of a room full of people. A sentence so cold that it erased 15 years of sacrifice in less than 5 seconds. The mansion glowed beneath crystal chandeliers. Music floated through the halls, while wealthy guests laughed and celebrated. Investors, executives, and socialites filled every corner of the estate. It was Danielle's annual company celebration, and everyone wanted to be near the man they called a success story. They admired his wealth, his confidence, and the empire he had built. What most of them didn't know was that Clara had helped build it too. Years earlier, before the luxury cars and the mansion, Danielle had been a struggling entrepreneur with more dreams than money. Investors rejected him. Friends doubted him. Some even laughed at his ambitions. Clara never did. She stood beside him when nobody else would. She used the inheritance left by her parents to help keep his business alive. She sold jewelry, worked extra hours, and sacrificed her own comfort so he could pursue his dreams. Every contract, every employee, every success had roots in sacrifices she had made. Then success arrived. At first, it strengthened their lives. The company expanded, money flowed in, doors opened. But as Danielle became richer, he became more concerned with appearances. He cared more about how people saw him than who had helped him become successful. That was when Celine entered his life. She was beautiful, confident, elegant, and always seemed to know exactly what to say. Whenever she appeared, Danielle's attention shifted. Clara noticed everything: the long conversations, the late night meetings, the way his face brightened whenever Celine entered the room. She also noticed how he gradually pushed her further into the background. Yet she remained silent, not because she was weak, but because she believed truth eventually reveals itself. On the night of the celebration, Clara helped supervise preparations. Many guests had never met her before and assumed she worked for the household staff. Nobody corrected them, Daniel least of all. As the evening continued, an investor approached Daniel with a friendly smile. "Daniel, you haven't introduced us to your wife." Nearby conversation slowed. Several people turned to look. Clara stopped walking. Daniel glanced toward her. For a brief moment their eyes met. Then he laughed. "Oh, Clara," he said casually. "She's not my wife." Confusion spread across the investor's face. Daniel wrapped an arm around Celine. "She helps around the house," he continued. "She's basically the maid." Silence crashed across the room. Some guests looked shocked. Others looked embarrassed. A few laughed nervously. Clara felt dozens of eyes settle on her, waiting, watching, judging. Daniel expected humiliation. He expected tears, maybe even anger. Instead, Clara calmly set down the tray she was carrying and smiled. It was a small smile, but it unsettled him immediately. It wasn't the smile of someone defeated. It was the smile of someone who had finally stopped expecting better from a person. For the first time all evening, Daniel felt uneasy. Later that night, Clara stood alone on a balcony overlooking the city. The lights below shimmered against the darkness. Behind her, the party continued as though nothing had happened. Footsteps approached. She turned and saw Mr. Mensah, Daniel's oldest mentor. He had known Daniel long before the success, long before the mansion, and long before the lies. He looked troubled. "I heard what happened," he said quietly. Clara nodded. "Tomorrow will be difficult," he continued. "Why?" Clara asked. Mr. Mensah hesitated before lowering his voice. "Because tomorrow a document will be read before the family." Clara frowned. "What document?" The old man's expression darkened. "The final wishes of someone who knew the truth." Inside the mansion, Daniel raised a glass while guests applauded him once again. He smiled proudly, unaware that less than 24 hours later, a single document would destroy the image he had spent years creating. When those words were finally read aloud, The woman he had introduced as a maid would become the one person nobody could ignore. And the man who believed he controlled everything would discover that betrayal always comes with a price. The following afternoon, tension hung over the mansion like a storm cloud. Word had spread that the family would gather for the reading of a legal document left behind by Daniel's late business partner, Samuel Adeyemi. Few people understood why the meeting was necessary. Fewer still understood why Samuel had specifically requested that every key member of the family and company be present. Daniel certainly wasn't worried. He arrived wearing an expensive suit and the confidence of a man accustomed to getting his way. Selene sat beside him, elegant as always, while several executives took seats around the long conference table. Clara arrived quietly and sat near the back. Nobody offered her a place of honor. Nobody greeted her warmly. To most people, she was still the woman Danielle had called a maid. The family attorney eventually entered carrying a thick folder. Conversations faded, chairs shifted, the room grew silent. "Thank you all for coming," the attorney said. "Mr. Adeyemi left specific instructions regarding the reading of this document. He requested that it be presented exactly as written." Daniel leaned back comfortably. Samuel had been his mentor and early investor. He assumed the document contained little more than sentimental messages and instructions regarding company shares. The attorney opened the folder and began reading. At first, everything seemed routine. Samuel spoke of friendship, perseverance, and the company's growth. Several people nodded respectfully. Then the tone changed. "There is a truth I can no longer remain silent about," the attorney read aloud. The room became still. Daniel's smile faded slightly. "Many believe Daniel built this company alone. That is false. The true foundation of this company was Clara." Several heads turned toward her. Daniel straightened in his chair. The attorney continued. "When banks refused loans, Clara provided funding from her personal inheritance. When operations nearly collapsed, Clara paid salaries from her own savings. When investors abandoned the company, Clara remained. Without her sacrifices, there would be no business to celebrate today." Murmurs spread across the room. Executives exchanged surprised looks. Some had never heard any of this before. Danielle shifted uncomfortably. Selena's expression tightened. The attorney turned another page. "Because history has been rewritten by those who benefit from forgetting it, I have attached supporting documents, financial records, and signed agreements verifying every statement." Several folders were distributed around the table. As people examined the documents, disbelief spread across their faces. Bank transfers, contracts, receipts, legal records. The evidence was overwhelming. Clara had funded critical stages of the company's survival. Clara had carried risks that Daniel never mentioned. Clara had been far more than a supportive spouse. She had been one of the company's true founders. Daniel's confidence began to crack. "This is unnecessary," he interrupted. "Everyone already knows Clara helped." The attorney looked directly at him. "The document isn't finished." Silence returned. The attorney continued reading. "To Clara, whose loyalty was rewarded with neglect, I leave my remaining shares in the company." A collective gasp filled the room. Danielle's eyes widened. Celine froze. "These shares represent 28% ownership." The room erupted with whispers. 28%. It was enough to make Clara one of the largest shareholders in the company, enough to give her significant influence over major decisions, enough to completely change the balance of power. Daniel immediately stood. "There must be a mistake." The attorney calmly shook his head. "The transfer has already been completed." Daniel's face drained of color. For years he had treated Clara as though she existed on the edges of his success. Now she held a position powerful enough to challenge him directly. The attorney raised a hand for silence and continued. "There is one final statement." Every eye remained fixed on him. "Success reveals character. Wealth magnifies it. If Clara is hearing these words, then she has likely endured treatment she never deserved." My hope is that she finally understands her worth, regardless of who failed to recognize it. The room fell completely silent. Clara lowered her eyes for a moment, not because she was ashamed, because after years of being ignored, someone had finally spoken the truth aloud. Daniel looked around the room. The admiration he usually saw in people's faces was gone. In his place were disappointment, suspicion, and judgment. People were connecting the pieces. They were remembering how he had introduced Clara the previous night. They were realizing exactly what kind of man would erase the person who helped build his empire. Selene quietly looked away. For the first time since entering Daniel's life, she seemed uncertain. Daniel opened his mouth to defend himself, but no word.